Okay, good. Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock on Tuesday, September 25th, and I will call this briefing meeting to order. Board members, we have on the agenda under academic services our summer programs, Investing in Our Children, the Gibson Audit, Annual Investment Summary, and public comment. So we shall start right off with our summer programs, Investing in Our Children.
Just as Dr. Creel and team make their way to the dais, just wanted to let board members know that this was actually a board member request. We wanted to look at really the return on investment for our summer program. So Dr. Creel and her team has prepared this presentation as a response to a board member request.
It's pretty comprehensive, too. Welcome, Dr. Creel.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you today the information regarding our summer programs. You'll see that some are required programs and some are programs that we have done in our district.
Would you pull the microphone closer to you?
It would help if I turned it on.
Better.
So as we share with you about our summer programs, Investing in Our Children, we know that originally our task was to look at how we have really doing a program analysis. But we felt like that we wanted to show how we are investing in our children and how we are looking to even make some tweaks as we already plan for the summer of 2019. So at this point, Dr. Edson has always done a great job of helping us gather data as he's done this time. And you see team members here that are going to share out the programs that they were responsible for.
So I had the privilege of working with all these fine folks and gathering information. And I've worked in the district for 21 years now. And I was still amazed at how many different programs and how many different summer opportunities we offer. And so we are going to proceed, and each of these folks are going to talk to you about the programs that they were in charge of. And they fall into two categories: required programs. We're going to talk about 3 of those. And then we have district-initiated programs as well. And so we are going to start out with the ESY program, Extended School Year. And Ms. Duncan is going to present some information about that program.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Our Extended School Year program is available
You can come up to the mic there. Thanks.
Is available to students whose IEP team indicates that they need that to continue to make progress on the goals that are in their IEP. So it is a required program for students. This summer we had the program at 4 sites. More than half of the students that were recommended, 54%, did attend.
Is that voluntary?
It's not mandatory to attend in the summer. It's required that we provide the opportunity, but parents can decide whether they want to send their children or not. Okay. Different than the school year.
Can I ask 2 questions, because these numbers show up throughout your presentation? Is there significance to showing up at least one day and then 70%? Like, why were those numbers chosen?
I'm sorry, that's my fault.
It's not your fault.
No, I'm just joking about that. But we weren't real consistent with that as we moved through each of the programs. But a couple of years ago, when we did some reviews of our 5th quarter program, we thought it would be important to for some of our measures to base those on students who had attended a majority of the days. So it was really an arbitrary cutoff, but we thought it would give some idea of how consistent the attendance was.
Okay, thank you.
So the number of students eligible were 591. For the students that attended at least one day, so we have a number of students that might start and then either for reasons for their family not continue the whole time, but we did have 205 students that attended at least 70%. One thing we did this year is combine some locations so that we could reduce costs with transportation. And we also looked at the students' goals and found that 950 goals were made, the students made progress, and 252 they are either still working on or they made, that those are still an area of concern for the student. It's different than a school goal where school starts in September, you have goals, you work on them all year. IEPs are created throughout the year. So a student could have a new IEP in April or May and just be working on a goal that they go to ESY. So it's not necessarily they've been working on that goal all year. So it would be expected that they would make varying levels of progress on the goals during that time. And they do also get related services, so they would get, if they get speech, OT, PT during the year, they would continue to receive those services during summer school if indicated in the IEP as well.
Good.
The next program is the voluntary pre-K program conducted in the summertime.
Okay, Jeannie LaFountain, I oversee this VPK program. And so as you can see, this is a program for 4-year-olds who have not accessed VPK during the school year. It is required by law that we provide 300 hours, which is why we have such a long day. There just almost are not enough hours over the summer unless we do a very long day. So this year it was 9 hours per day, which is a long day for, you know, for 4-year-olds. We had the program at 2 locations. And so we used to have a larger program like in the beginning, but as more kids access it during the school year, there are less children out there who really need it. But we are required to offer it, so we do. We had 44 students in the summer program. 100% of those children attended over 70% of the time, and so the average was 89% attendance rate. So we felt pretty good about that. If you look at the next slide shows you that the children all made, about over half of the children made progress in every area that was assessed. There was a pre and post assessment, and so all over half of the kids made good progress on that. Then you can see the funding source comes from the state, and you can see the expenditure and the cost per student was about $1,400, but we are reimbursed by the state a little over $2,000 for each child in the summer program.
Question, could we serve any of the other students that had voluntary EP, pre-kindergarten during the school year, or it's only for those that didn't go to any?
It's only for those who did not access summer VPK. I mean, school year VPK. They're the only ones who are eligible for summer.
Board members, any other questions?
Just did it. Because I was having
Thank you, very interesting.
Just an interesting piece that I note, that the participation level is higher and more consistent for this, and I wonder if it may have something to do with actually the length of the day.
Because parents work.
Parents work,
Right.
and so it allows for that opportunity for them to be there.
Mm-hmm. That could be.
Versus our other programs.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, we offer a reading camp for 3rd graders, specifically those students who don't do well on FSA.
Hello, my name's Erin Grunewald, and I oversaw that program. Students scoring a level 1 on FSA and being retained are required to have the opportunity to attend reading camp by state statute, which is noted there. Our camp did run for 25 days, 4 days a week, for 4.5 hours per day, and the students were taught by highly qualified teachers based on their collective VAM. And again, that was a new state statute. We offered reading camp at 7 schools that also hosted 5th quarter, and we offered it at 2 sites per zone, as well as at Royal Palm. By offering reading camp at the 5th quarter sites, this allows parents that might have students in multiple grades to make sure their students can access both programs. We also, by offering it in 2 zone sites, reduce the cost of transportation, as well as allowing for closer proximity to homes. It reduced the students' bus ride. There are 6 different good cause criteria a student could be eligible to receive if they score a level 1 on FSA. This permits students to be good caused to 4th grade. Under state statute that you saw before, as well as the new criteria for House Bill 7069, regardless of what criteria a student may be good caused for, there's very specific requirements for support in 4th grade. At the conclusion of reading camp, students are provided to have a good cause based on the state-approved alternative assessments, which are the results that you're seeing. The state requires the students to score 50th percentile on STAR, and 45th percentile rank on the SAT 10. The state just released new cut scores for SAT 10, so that will increase slightly for this coming school year. Dr. Itzen did do some work on that, and we're anticipating it's 1 to 2 more questions answered correctly for our students. One of the reasons you see a discrepancy in the number of students that received a level 1 and those that attended is because of all of the different good cause possibilities. This chart actually shows you over time all of the good cause possibilities and the number of students we've had that met that. And the reason 6 and 7 are collapsed is because this past year the state put them together. And the next slide are our expenditures. And I thought of particular note that might be of interest to you. This past year, as well as in 2016, we were chosen for a state audit of our reading camp. And in both of those instances, our curriculum was given accolades by the state. And our curriculum is written by the amazing people in the curriculum department. Any questions?
Questions, board members? Thank you, very interesting.
Now we're going to move on to district-initiated programs, and we have several different programs that are offered for our ELL students, and Ms. Rivera is here to review those with you.
Good afternoon. We offer 4 different summer programs in order to not only increase language proficiency, but also to increase base knowledge in the content areas. We offered last year a summer program for Algebra One, and this is for students who were waiting to pass the EOC. And also we offer an ELL's language for grades 9 through 12, and science for middle grades, 6 through 8, and also an elementary summer camp too for science. We actually measure gains both in attendance and also in pre and post test. The first one is the Algebra Camp. On the students that attended at least 70% at all the camps, we increased from 185 students to 187. This is like 1.1%. It's a small increase, but at least we got more students to attend all camps at least 70% of the time. In algebra, this is measured by the students either pass or don't pass the EOC. These students, this was not as a successful camp because the students were awaiting for the results from their PERT test that they took and also the EOC, so they were still not sure about if this, they were needed to attend or not. So unfortunately, in this one, basically, only 8 students out of the 14 actually met the requirements for graduation. So we are very proud of these students because even though it's one of the shortest camps, only lasts about 11 days, these students were able to meet graduation requirements. Thanks to passing this the test during the summer. The next camp is our language ELL camp. The attendance went up from 49 students from the previous year into 65 this past year, and this is an increase of 32.9% in attendance. Over 80% of the students of this camp attended more than 80% of the time. The gains of this camp is about 30.8% increased gains from the pre-test to the post-test. For this particular program, we use a newcomers program curriculum that is specifically to address the cultural needs and also understanding of these students that are trying to adjust to the new culture. These students did very well. The curriculum was well accepted by the teachers to the point that they would like to use the same curriculum again. This curriculum brings a pre-test and a post-test. So the gains from one to the next is 30.80% of increase. The middle school science camp, the attendance again will increase from 33 students that attended the previous year to 37 students this past year. This is represents 12.1% increase in attendance. The gains of these students, again, if we use the curriculum that is next generation curriculum, exactly aligned with the state standard for next generation. And again, the program brings a pre and a post test, and the gains that the students had was 24.7% increase. This is a significant percent increase in such a short period of time of being in this camp. The last camp, and it's one of the most successful camps that we have always offered, is the ELL Science Summer Camp. This summer camp is offered for students in 4th grade to prepare them for the next year IFCAT science test. To lay the foundation so this next standard that they're going to learn new, we're building background knowledge, so when they get to visit those standards in the next grade level, they already have some background knowledge. Also, we revisit some standards that were not actually touched in 4th grade that were introduced in 3rd grade. So this is a very important way that we crafted our own curriculum. Dr. Carlos Negron was the one that he put together this curriculum by analyzing the data and recognizing and identifying the standards that were really in need of being better mastered by our students. And we developed a curriculum that was really very successful, has been very successful from the time that we implemented it. That was back in 3 or 4 years ago. The attendance of this camp is also wonderful. It increased this year by 7.6, but actually begins with more students attending the camp. The gains that these students experienced was from 22.3% from the pre-test to the post-test. Again, these were test items that were developed by us, and we took into account the DOK levels of the different questions, make sure that we target those higher level thinking questions, and not only just the basic knowledge that they were just a repeat. It's a hands-on curriculum that students enjoy, has a lot of experiments, a lot of activities, and it also field trips that the students also enjoy. These summer programs also had an ISO paraprofessional in every classroom. Those paraprofessionals help bridge the content with the teachers and also to facilitate and contextualize instruction. The source of funding is Title III, was fully for Title III funding. And you can see on the next slide the total expenses for this camp. If you have any questions, I'll be very glad to answer.
It seems like the only area where we had a decrease in enrollment was algebra, right?
Yes.
Do you have any feel for why we had fewer students this year than in the past?
Yes. Basically, as I said before, the students are waiting for the results. They don't know if they didn't pass the test. So they wait until the last minute to decide if they actually need to attend or not. I honestly too don't know exactly if there's any other way of identifying if they need to attend at an earlier point, even though as soon as we invite everybody that we send the invitations to the school, we hold a parent meeting. We invite all the parents that actually turn in their registration form. We bring them back here, and we give all kind of information about the different camps, and we stress about the importance of how this is going to extend and also enrich the opportunities for the kids. It's important that even though your child, ends on passing the test, in this case, is also a wonderful thing that they continue to revisit those skills.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes?
Ms. Fisher first, sorry.
Oh, okay. So at the language ELL camp and the 4th grade science camp, I see the same school listed twice with little initials next to it.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you well.
Okay.
It was Lehigh Senior.
Yes, okay. So on the language ELL camp and the 4th grade science camp, there's the same school listed twice. and then there's like a little parentheses with different initials in it. What does that indicate?
In which slide? Let me just take a look at this slide.
Okay, so let's look at,
That's right.
Carlos. Yes, come on, Carlos.
oh,
Those are two different classrooms. So that was when I put the data together to identify those,
okay.
classrooms. I put the initials of the teachers that actually taught.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, so,
The same school site.
okay,
Yes. And
same school site, two different teachers.
yes. The situation, we started with one, we planned for one classroom only, and the demand was higher than we expected, and we immediately opened a second classroom with another new teacher and also a new paraprofessional. So there are two different classrooms simultaneously and open and teaching the students in the same school.
Because in both those cases, I noticed that the percentage gain
Yes,
is almost double with one classroom
because we're
than the other.
combined, right, Carlos?
Ms. Fisher, that's a wonderful notation from you, and that's one of the things that as we move forward into next year, is that as we analyze this data and we ask the questions, what is it that worked, that we saw even greater success in the classroom that
That was my
HA
next
taught,
question. Yeah.
so that we're looking at those strategies so that we can replicate those strategies. Those are some of the things that where we saw some increase based on specific teachers, that we can drill down into those strategies and replicate them again for this next summer.
Awesome. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So I just had one other question before Mrs. LaRiviere. So to what extent, when we look at especially the elementary kids, to what extent are we considering things like IQ, environment, and other variables, or don't we? Do we just look at the test data? And then when you have a student who's in third grade and already been retained twice,
Okay, this
and they're still a level 1. So are we looking at something different than at that case or not?
Okay, these particular camps are, everybody gets invited. All the students have the same opportunities to attend the camps. We provide, the teachers are all ESOL endorsed teachers, and this is one of the requirements to teach these camps. Yes. And also the paraprofessionals are bilingual. These students, this is again another way to help these students move to the next level in, first of all, in language acquisition and also in core content knowledge. These students might need this opportunity to get into smaller groups with a different, everybody's ELL. They feel more, less threatening environment, and the teachers have more chance to differentiate because they are all ELL students. Right. We also have ESOL specialists that oversee each camp. So we have the 4 ESOL specialists. There are 4 camps. We have 4 ESOL specialists that were extended their contract during the summer, so they could revisit those classrooms and work with those teachers in lesson modeling during the summer.
Thank you.
But the combination of all these elements are other opportunities to help our students move forward and also be ready for the fall next year so they can be more successful in participating in an all-English classroom.
Great. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Any other questions?
Going back to Ms. Patrica asked the question about the Algebra One. I wonder if some of the ELL students went to the regular Algebra One camp instead of the ELL.
You brought a very important point because that actually happened 2 years ago, specifically at Lehigh Senior. Okay. The enrollment was low in our ELL summer algebra camp, and the teachers proposed, and it was a great idea. When they come from the teachers, it was a great idea. I said, why don't we combine and co-teach the camps, combining the regular, the non-ELL camp, and also our ELS, and the 2 teachers that year co-taught, and the ESOL paraprofessional provided assistance. So there were 2 teachers taking turns. The ELL teacher provided individual assistance to the ELLs, and the camp was also very successful. We're thinking also maybe perhaps that there's a chance also that some of we analyze the data of the ones that are in the non-ELL classroom to see how many of them actually ended up ELLs in the regular camp. There's a great chance that happened. If that situation actually occurred, would be also a good idea, perhaps maybe combine the camps, let everybody enroll in the same camp and provide the ESOL paraprofessional as a support to the teacher.
The challenge of students not knowing, like, their test score results from the spring is not going to get any better this school year. Statute allows for some later reporting dates because the testing is all pushed to the end of the year. So third grade reading will be okay because the state has to get that to us by May 31st, but the rest of the results don't really have to be released until prior to June 30th. So we're going to run into that same thing in terms of not knowing exactly the target audience. What we do with fifth quarter and some of these other programs is to base it on the third or fourth quarter STAR scores, just to start identifying the students that we can invite.
And this is also something that from now Dr. Creel is looking into all this, and this is not too soon to start thinking about the summer, according to Dr. Creel. So it is important that we are, as a team, that we have regular conversations about how we can make things better. This is the time that Dr. Creel has talked to us about starting thinking about the summer, looking at the data, the things that went well, the things that didn't go as well as we planned, and also re-gear our track.
Board members.
Any questions?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for all you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know how you keep track of it all. Okay.
Ms. LaFountain is back to talk to us about the fifth quarter program.
Now I have my Title I hat on, and we're going to talk about fifth quarter for just a couple of minutes. We started fifth quarter in 2015 with the idea of trying to prevent summer learning loss. And so that's the thing to always remember about fifth quarter, is it's really to prevent summer learning loss. And so any gains that we see are really just icing on the cake. So we've offered it since 2015, and then if you take a look, we've been affected a little bit by House Bill 7069. In 2015, we were able to set aside funds in order to provide the program from the district level. At this point, those funds that we were able to set aside for a small number of schools now have to go to all schools, and so it spreads out. Schools already have their plans made, and so sometimes they just don't have the funding to continue it. So you'll see a little bit of a drop in the number of schools that have participated in the fifth quarter program, partially because of that. Also in 2015, we had 10 DA schools, and so now we have 1. And so we'd like to think that the fifth quarter did help contribute to that, and that decline anyhow. And so you will see a little bit of a decrease. Next year we have 3 schools who have set aside 3 elementary schools who have set aside funds for fifth quarter. So we'll continue to look on that. A lot of schools though use their summer for curriculum development, data analysis, and teacher training. So if you look at the next slide, you'll see the gains that we made, and this was a great year for us. This is the first year that we have seen an actual increase across all grade levels. So it was very targeted towards students who really needed it. So we always look at levels 1 and 2, grades K through 4. This growth is based on the pre and post assessments that were done at the beginning, either at the end of the school year or the very first couple of days of fifth quarter, and then at the end of the program. So like I said, every grade level showed an increase, so we were pleased to see that. Again, like Aaron shared with you, the curriculum that we used was developed in our curriculum department, and teachers love the curriculum. We tweak it a little bit every year. Last year we added a science component, and so we did add a science curriculum to it that's project-based, which enhanced the curriculum a great deal. So we're feeling pretty good about that. And then I believe you're on, okay, this slide is the one that will show you that this is this is once the children get into school, then we look at their baseline. So the other slide showed you pre and post, and then now that they're in school and they've taken their star at the beginning of the year, this shows you that they continue that those scores continue to reflect growth over the summer. So like I said before, our goal is really just to prevent summer learning loss, and so to see growth is really, we're very pleased to see that. So, and then the last slide shows you the cost per student, the total cost and the cost per student. Again, we think the cost went up a little bit this year, and we're thinking that has to do with just the fact that schools are, you don't share the cost across the whole program, that schools now have to fund it. And we do fund a little bit from Title I, like transportation and some other supports. So, and then we have, the last couple of years, we have had Title I dollars directed toward middle and high schools who offer a summer program. Last year, it was directed at incoming 6th and 9th graders. This year was a little more targeted for schools that had specific needs, such as credit recovery. That's fifth quarter.
Thank you. One of those opportunities for us as we begin to explore for the summer of 2019 to encourage schools to possibly team, that we would have specialized areas that we're working with as we team schools together, that we can drill down and possibly have students that need support around reading or specific support around mathematics, that we're able to join those funds together and not have it operating almost as a standalone site, but work to team together with schools based on what our outcomes are showing with student progress.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick.
So a couple of things that you said made me angry. Not at you.
Oh, good. I'm really glad to hear that.
It seems that we can offer these services to fewer students because of the change in 7069, and it seems that we're less efficient in terms of the cost of providing these services to our students because of 7069. Is that a fair assessment?
I would have to say you're correct.
That's what makes me angry, not you.
Makes me angry too.
And what's really amazing is that despite those two obstacles, you were able to improve educational outcomes for students.
Exactly
so
right.
Kudos to you for operating even better in a system that's tying your hands. Good job.
And just to jump on that point, the other place besides just these summer programs where it continues to be a struggle is what we do during the regular year. One of the reasons why I believe we were able to do the dramatic reductions in our number of DA schools is because we had the flexibility to take funding and put those dollars where they were needed. Now, because of the way the funding is done, it makes it much more challenging to do that. Reducing local control, increasing bureaucracy, and making it more difficult to do what's right for students.
But increasing their argument for privatization of public education.
Ms. Fisher.
Okay, so then in looking at the gains that we enjoyed in 2018, at every grade level, that was really good across the board. And I would re-ask the question again when we're doing these programs, these extended programs, to what extent do we consider other variables besides the test scores, or don't we? That's one question. And then I was at Cape Coral High School International Baccalaureate breakfast the other day, and so the students who were amazing and sharing their research and their extended essays were talking and discussing some of the things that they had discovered, and one student had an excellent idea for all schools. He said that his research showed that 4-day weeks in the workplace and in the school result in more productivity. So he decided that we should not come to school on Monday all year long, and then we should take those Mondays and use those to extend the school year, not only to prevent learning loss, but also to provide enrichment for those students needing it. So I just wanted to share that because I thought it was a great idea.
Yes,
And he
absolutely.
had tons of research to back it up.
So, Ms. Fisher,
Did he give you the money tree to go along with it?
No, he said he's going to advocate for the sales tax.
That's a fascinating concept. Dr. Edson?
so Ms. Fisher, did I understand then that you would encourage us to look at different kinds of measures besides test scores to look at the improvement of students?
Right. I wondered how, how much of that is involved, or are we just looking at the test data? I mean, because there's so much more to it for each individual student.
So up until now, we've collected attendance data and whatever pre-post measures we have, generally some sort of test, but we can certainly look at what the other possibilities are as we move forward.
Like one of the things might be at the primary levels, the age of the student, because at that point, months make a difference, and anyone who knows about child development, and we all do, kids develop at different rates. So sometimes, say you have somebody who's got a July or August birthday, they're 8 months younger than some of the other kids in the class, so it may take them longer to get to point A and be actually on grade level or grade level equivalent. So I was just wondering how much of that goes into the decision.
In fifth quarter, what I can tell you is we do target level 1 and 2 students, but there's always principal discretion as well. So if the school recognizes that a student needs it, I mean, it's not limited just to those kids. It's not hard. But, if the school does see some need for that, or the principal or teacher or counselor, whoever, I mean, it's up to the principal. If they want to let them in, absolutely. Nobody is turned away. But our target students are those level 1s and 2s, hoping not to lose any summer, any loss over the summer, and then hoping to get them up to where they're meeting expectations.
Thank you.
In addition to that, the types of camps that are being provided add in oftentimes that additional criteria. For example, the fifth quarter, those are Title I schools. So you're looking at students that are in more impoverished families, and then you're looking at the ELL camps, and that's around your language acquisition. So there is a second factor or more that's going into the determination of which students, but it's almost in how the camps are set up themselves of how that additional criteria goes into place too.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Schilling is going to talk about his summer credit recovery program with Lee Virtual.
Good afternoon, school board members, Dr. Atkins and Mr. Williams. We did our third summer session since we've been around. This past summer, we did an 8-week session with 11 teachers. Each teacher had a capacity of up to 80 students. They're paid on a supplemental contract for 20 hours, and we offered 29 courses. And this was all done virtually, so it was students all working remotely and teachers, for the most part, working remotely as well. Our summer team had a gross completion rate of 66%. That means out of all the students who signed up for a virtual class for summer, for whatever reason, 66% of them were successful and received credit. Our net completion rate, however, was 78%. That means disaggregating the number of students who it wasn't such a good idea, decided to go on vacation, take them out, and that's how that number comes up. There's a graph there also to kind of show you graphically our success with students doing online this summer.
Great.
So we're funded through SAI dollars. The total cost, including teachers and curriculum, was approximately $108,000. Our virtual FTE that was collected, there's a little variance in the number there. To update that was actually approximately $425 per half credit enrollment. So we realized a little bit greater savings, that upward over $200,000.
So Mr. Schilling was explaining to me one day that we have quite a few students who do virtual classes with Florida Virtual School. And so every time a student does a virtual class with them, a certain amount of the FTE goes to the Florida Virtual School. And so I think he, as we move forward, will be interested in looking at how we can keep that money in the district.
Yes, Ms. Patrica.
Is there a way that we can look at the success rates over the past couple of years since this has been in existence to see if we're improving, and have changes been made in order to accommodate?
I can provide you with that data. Unfortunately, last year we did not offer a summer session due to budget concerns, but I talked them into it this year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams organized the credit recovery program for 9th and 10th graders.
Good afternoon. During my time at the high school, working at the high school and also working at Success Academy, I noticed that 9th and 10th graders who failed one or more core courses increased the chance of them dropping out. So when I came to this current position, there was a grant, Title I Part D, that was available to assist with this. The funds for the grant are generated at the Department of Juvenile Justice site. And I say at the Department of Juvenile Justice site, it doesn't have to be, if someone attends the Department of Juvenile Justice site, they don't have to be enrolled in school in order for to generate these funds. The other things about these funds is that they can be used at any at-risk school or any at-risk student, okay? Which means that if a student's having attendance issues, behavior issues, or curriculum issues, we can use those funds for those kids, okay? I started this program about 4 or 5 years ago, and I found it to be very successful. We have kids who, 9th and 10th grade, who have failed core classes that come to school in the summer, 14 days, okay, 4 hours a day, and they use our electronic Edgenuity to recover their credits. This year, we had about 51% of the students recover their credits, which I think is marvelous. Okay? We also pay the teachers on a supplemental contract, and our cost is approximately $108 per student. Any questions?
Do we have that comparison data going past the past several years that you've done?
I have all 5 years comparison data.
I'd love to see that if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'll allow me to interject as Ms. Ralph is coming to the mic, we're very excited about a pilot program that we're putting in place with 4 middle schools just for this first quarter. You heard Mr. Williams speak about Edgenuity. One of the things that we have done over the summer is, in conjunction with Colusa Middle School, we have created within Edgenuity assessments by the quarter. And what we're hoping to do, or our plan is that as students by quarter show that they do not have mastery, that we have created opportunities for them to do interventions, and that they can show through the assessment in Edgenuity that are aligned with our curriculum maps, that they have mastered that curriculum by quarter, so that we're not waiting to the end of the year to show that a student has in some point during the year failed the course, and that we can recoup that credit by quarter, and that the student is not having, and this is a middle school pilot, but that we are not waiting to the end of the year to go back to recoup credit.
And with that, we will make sure we get them enrolled in their right school to support their needs for the remainder of the school year. So I'm going to talk to you for just a second about Algebra One. This is a voluntary program for our students that runs a 2-week window to help those students to be remediated prior to the EOC or the PERT. You can see we're up by over about 70 students, and we also had an increase in the percentage of number of students that passed this year. We offered the program this past year at 14 of our 15 high schools. Bonita Springs High School did not offer it because they have only had the 9th and the 10th graders. They had just finished up. So those students at our other schools were seeing success. I listened to Evelyn talk about the ELL. We offered the Algebra One camp a little later in the year, so some of those students that do not participate in ELL camp for Algebra One actually participate in the Algebra One other camp that occurs right before the PERT or the ELC testing. Questions?
Completely unrelated. It's student engagement now, right?
We are actually engaging all of our students, but we're calling the department student enrollment.
Student enrollment.
But we're engaging families and students.
Can you tattoo that to the inside of my eyelids? I can't remember that. I cannot.
If you want me to give you a tattoo, I'll be more than happy to. And it's a learning curve, but parents are being very appreciative that we're enrolling their students now, not assigning their students. So it has a total different...
What is student engagement? Do we have that?
So we have a team that's called Student Engagement, and at one point we had discussed the possibility of changing the title from Student Assignment to Student Engagement, but based on conversations and really discussion, particularly with our ELL population, is that we felt like that there would be less confusion with the title of student enrollment versus student engagement, and so that they would understand the enrolling a child into the school versus the engagement. So it was really about a language piece and making sure that we were clearly communicating what we're doing in that area.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So in addition to a couple of these high school credit recovery programs, we had other credit recovery going on, and so we pulled the data for all of the credit recovery, and the district offered about 70 different courses so that students could get back on track. Now, it's not all credit recovery. Some of it is actually original credit, and you'll see that driver's ed is included in this as well. But we had 629 students that were able to successfully obtain some credit, and you see the number of credits there. It's not a one-to-one because most of the students were doing 0.5, right, a semester, making up a semester of a course. These are the top courses, so to speak, and so you see that driver's ed was a lot of it, but you have a lot of different courses, required courses, that make up the bulk of the credit recovery. And then some numbers. This collecting of the dollar amounts and stuff like that was new to me, and so I hope I got all this right, but we got some numbers on the total expenses, and driver's education was included in there, and that was from a specific funding source. And so you see the cost per student if you combine those with the across the 629 students. So the last program is a program that was conducted at Dunbar Community, and I don't see Mr. Burns here. He is the one who has the details on that program, but Dr. Creel and I can talk to it to a certain extent. He and I believe Mr. Eady got together and developed a program for the community there in the Dunbar community, and they offered the program for 24 days, and they had over 100 students who came and participated. And part of that program was credit recovery, but the majority was to look for employment opportunities for those students. So out of the 110 students that attended consistently, 84 of them received some sort of internship or even a volunteer position or some type of temporary employment. Did I miss anything? And this was also from SAI dollars, and you see the expenditure versus the student per cost there. I think that's the last program, and so you've suggested some things that we look at, and Dr. Creel has talked about looking further into the data to look at some best practices. We do have, in some cases, from some very specific data, but at least we can look at the data by site, not always by teacher, but we will be doing some debriefing this fall, and at least come the first of the year, beginning some plans for this coming summer. Did you want to add anything to that?
Just a quick comment about just the SOS program. I know that Dr. Carlin and Kaylee and Jared are all working on trying to secure external funding for that particular program, which you know, I feel very confident they'll be able to do that. And then when it comes to you know, a program that also adds the what's the politically correct way of saying this now? You know, what we would call soft skills, we're calling foundational skills, I believe. And so they really work on that type of skill set for those students. And I know some of you went over and had an opportunity to walk through that school and saw that those kids were busy at work, heavily engaged throughout the course of the summer. And this is something we want to grow moving forward.
Is that it?
I think that's our summary. We appreciate your attention. Yes.
Ms. Giovanelli.
So my question is, the attendance, is this normal, or was it high or low, or what do we have that to compare it to? Because I kind of thought it would be more, maybe my expectation was higher. Do we know?
I don't have the figures on hand, but in my experience, at least in doing this in years past, it's pretty typical. Sometimes only about half of the students that we invite show up, and attendance is rather challenging in the summer.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. That's been my experience as well. It's kind of disappointing. I mean, a lot of these kids, you really want to be there. And I know that often school staff and district staff go over and above when it comes to contacting and trying to pull them in. So it's been quite a challenge, but you know, because we do see pretty good success, I think, with the students we're able to engage over the course of the summer. So we'd like to see participation increase.
Ms. Fisher?
Go ahead. Well, I do have one question, but go ahead.
Go ahead, finish.
Oh, no, my other question is, do we do anything to help the graduates that were borderline? Is there any kind of summer thing where they are shy of graduating for the credit recovery? I didn't see anything like that with, like, trying to achieve our graduation rate, boosting it up there and helping those borderline graduates.
That would have been captured in the credit recovery past, where Mr. Williams talked about his credit recovery for 9th and 10th grade. And in those courses that Dr. Itzen mentioned, that's where we would work to capture our seniors that may have needed those credits in order to become or be considered summer graduates.
Right. Okay.
I do believe that we will be more targeted and more strategic about that in the future. I can tell you that we already can tell you our seniors and our juniors by name that are short of the credits that they need. Again, we believe that we need to work on this in a more proactive manner and versus a reactive during the summer. So we are, in fact, as we're doing the learning walks, we are pairing that with graduation task force conversations so that our schools and Shelley Taylor and Dr. Freeman are having conversations about specific students and working with them to really go ahead and make sure that we are meeting those needs now.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. So then my only question was, with the support of our students, is transportation an issue, do you think, with that program, or?
Jared could come down maybe and address that.
Here he comes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atkins, board members. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Fisher, to your question, thanks to the generous support of Mr. Cody, the transportation alleviation was something that we worked on last year. Another part of it is staffing. We employed district certified teachers to staff the program and man the program. So between the transportation cost as well as the staffing cost, that is what got us to that number. As it relates to also the employment human resources side, a great number of our students were actually employed by the district, and that was rolled into the total number for the budget. The students who were not employed by the district, those funds were generated through community support. So outside of the funds for students who work for our district, we had about $20,000 that were raised through community support that supported the balance of the children who were not employed with the district, as well as other municipalities.
Great, thank you. That's
Ms. Patrica,
a very adequate answer.
did you have another question?
I remember when I first heard about this program from you, I wanted you to present this to the board because I think that in our travels out there, we can really push this with community members and ask for them to increase their generosity with specific regard to this program. So I know that that's something I'll be, after November 6th, that's something that I will be talking about with the community.
Yes, ma'am, and we appreciate that support. We've been having a great opportunity to get out to the community supporters, thanks to Ms. LaRiviere and also Dr. Carlin. We've had great inroads in the Lehigh community through the Chamber of Commerce as well as their Rotary. So expanding that, we do have a meeting on October 11th with a lot of our district partners to have an opportunity to really get the information out from Mr. Burns and leadership at Dunbar Community School, as well as the community support. We had a presentation with the city of Fort Myers and the mayor. They were great partners with the Step Up to Work program that facilitated a lot of our kids during the summer. To the point about being able to track the success of the children, the curriculum was based on college and career readiness coming out of DOE, and we had the chance to really see those soft skills and hard skills that the superintendent alluded to. So we were pleased to see that by the end of the summer, there was a 30% gain from the pre and post assessment.
Nice. Great.
Just in those marketable skills, positive eye contact, and body language, and those sorts of mechanisms that we tracked.
Great. Thank you. Other questions?
My question is more general to you. Do we have summer enrichment programs district-wide, or is that just school by school?
Good afternoon, everyone. Superintendent Atkins. Those are emerging. If you think about it, I talked to you last November about Title IV, and our district received Title IV funds for the first time in fiscal year 18. We did a STEM summer camp at Florida Southwestern State College where 30 rising 4th and 5th graders went to FSW for 2 weeks, and they worked on a water quality project. And so that's a model that we're looking to scale out. Mr. Eady and I are in contact with FGCU about an opportunity there to provide more diversity and more programming for some of our students. So those are some STEM opportunities and enrichment opportunities that you're going to hear about pretty soon once we get our fiscal year 19 dollars for Title IV.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good question. Anything else, board members? I have one more question. We saw a lot of figures today comparing ourselves against other years and comparing schools one against the other. But how do we compare ourselves with other districts of the same size and similar demographics?
I'm not sure that we have that data at this point, the data points. That is something that we can reach out to our like-size districts and particularly check on the required summer programs. Those that are district-led programs, we may not be able to replicate that with other districts, but we can certainly check on the required programs and see how we compare with their data.
Yeah, it seems if we're looking at best practices, we want to do that within our community, but we also want to look at best practices across other districts so that we're really drawing on the best of the best as we can.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else, board members? All right. Thank you very much. Wonderful presentations, very well thought out, and lots of good data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now under business services, Dr. Atkins, we're moving to the Gibson audit recommendation.
Yes, Madam Chair, just kind of introduce this particular topic. This again is a request that came out of a workshop. Gibson, of course, reported not too long ago, and we said we would come back to you with a recommendation, and that's what we have done at this time. What we'd like to do is to go through this audit area by area. I've asked for our relevant administrators to really present their particular section, and then at the end I will provide basically what my recommendation would be, but I will ask for some guidance from the board in terms of steps forward. I do want to say overall that I'm very happy in the fact that we were able to do this audit. A lot of great information there. Pleased to say that the district, according to Gibson, is more efficient than it was 5 years ago, more efficient than state averages in most measured areas. But one of the reasons we do these audits is, of course, to make improvements. So that's what we're going to be doing with this information. Staff's already busy at work and actually implementing some of these things. There are some factors that we have to consider. You're doing a global data scan here, and then you're going to consider whether or not to do a phase 2 detailed analysis. There are some things that you have to consider, and that is, of course, we are one of the few growing districts. That gives us some unique needs. We are dealing with teacher shortages, skilled trades. We have a high degree of mobility, which I talked about last time, in both our students and also our workforce. So some factors that do influence the nature of which we are staffed. Having said all that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Burton, who will kick us off. And then again, when we get to the different areas, the administrator in charge of that area will add their comments.
All right, good afternoon, board members, Dr. Atkins. Brian Williams, welcome, sir. As Dr. Atkins opened, Greg Gibson and his team from Gibson Consulting had presented their overall efficiency study to you in a briefing a few months ago, and since that time, as Dr. Atkins said, each of us have been working together and with our teams on the areas that they reviewed, which are listed up on the screen and on your screens as well. So each of these will step through and provide you just, again, a quick summary of Gibson, what their recommendations were, what best practices that they noted, and then our district's response and recommendations that we have going forward regarding next steps. Does that sound all right? So each of the areas reviewed, I'll speak to the first two, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Pruitt for Human Resources, and I will speak again at Business Services. Mr. Mora will speak about Facilities Management, Mr. Davis on Technology. I'll come back again for Food Service. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Robert Cody for Transportation. So general district management, Gibson had a neutral efficiency ranking. Overall staffing efficiency was on par with our peer districts, and in some areas better. There was opportunities noted to increase as far as central administration, instructional leadership areas. Overall, we agree with this ranking and are areas that we are continually looking at to become more efficient in those areas around overall general district management. And
one of the things I want to mention about this particular area is I think that as we look towards some of the more specific areas within the central office and where we might consider deeper analysis, this is where we might look at improving some of the ratios that we find in this general scan in that second section or first section.
In school management.
Got a question?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
And I know you got me this information, but it's really hard for me to make the comparison as you're giving the presentation right now, but I don't know what we're talking about here in terms of dollars. Mm-hmm. Like, does it make sense for us to take a deeper dive into a program that costs the districts $1.7 million a year versus a department that costs $60 million a year? You know what I mean? So if you could give, like, I'm looking at page 77 of the budget right now, and I don't see general district management as an item in the budget.
Right.
So I don't know what we're talking about in terms of
So
here.
when Gibson did this review, and although they didn't equate it to actual dollars, the comparison to our peer districts was when they start comparing it as far as FTE, full-time equivalents. So when you have administrators and general district administration towards students and FTE, we can equate those to actual dollars that we can provide to you. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay. You're welcome. And this, on the same vein with school management, the below average efficiency ranking, where really it came a lot from was just in aid staffing, paraprofessionals. You know, we were, as far as the number of paraprofessionals to students, we were well below, or we were much higher than our peer districts. And then one of the areas that they recommended, and when they say below average, in comparison to other school districts, our peer districts and high-performing school districts, one of the areas they had mentioned was school consolidation. We do have a few smaller schools that are out there, and consolidating them, most of them are our Barrier Island schools, and they serve that very small community. And that's an area that would have its challenges. It could have opportunities as well, but we do realize that a smaller school population does provide some of the challenges. Our response and recommendations and things that we have been working on and continue to work through this current school year as we go into next year and the years beyond is really looking at how we totally revise our DRA process, our district resource allocation process, and how we allocate resources to schools. We obviously have our core subject areas and how we allocate to schools, but then in each school itself has its own unique student population and the resources that are required for each of those. So really looking at it at a school-by-school level when we get into some of the special programs that we have, as well as ESE, ESOL, and those areas. Also looking at what programs that we have out there that are very successful and making great returns as far as student achievement goes, but also ones that if they have a high cost, which ones have a potential that we should sunset. And then one of the recommendations that they made that we're analyzing to see if it makes sense or not is in where they make a suggestion of looking at reducing or consolidating paraprofessionals, as well as bookkeepers and building supervisors and custodial staff, especially at the smaller schools. So those are things that we have begun to do our own deep dive and what would or would not make sense in that area.
So this is one of the areas where you will see probably the largest change overall. The reason for that is that you have the maximum impact in school staffing. That's where the vast majority of our dollars are. But if you look at the percentage of our budget in terms of what we spend on, let's say, employees versus other districts, you're going to see some differences. And so that's a piece of data that we're looking at, but also looking at data in terms of how much are we spending in terms of a percentage of our budget on items such as paraprofessionals. And if you look at the Gibson audit in terms of he already mentioned the paraprofessional staffing ratio, but also the teacher staffing ratio, and how can we best maximize those ratios yet still meet the needs of the school. So if you've heard us talk about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, we really think that that's where we can get, I think, our maximum impact is by making sure that we are supporting Tier 3 schools in a way that they need to be supported, but we're going to have to staff a Tier 1 and a Tier 2 school potentially dramatically differently in order to be able to achieve that. We have to make better use of our staffs, both our teaching staff and also our instructional staff. There are some I don't want to call them luxuries, but there are some practices that we can change to, of course, maximize efficiency within buildings. This is something that you will hear about as board members. People are going to talk to you when we have any type of staffing change that we're making. However, I can assure you that we're going to involve our collective bargaining, our unions. We will also involve our administrators in this process because at the end of the day, it's going to impact their ability to support our students. So they will be involved. But again, this is where the majority of dollars are. We have to make some changes if we're going to remain competitive as a school district.
And I never have a problem, and I should have said it to the A-team when they were here, I never have a problem supporting a change when I'm confident in that change. I don't know what the impact is going to be of this on students and learning. I don't know what the impact is going to be of this on those Tier 1 and Tier 2 schools. I frequently hear now that Tier 3 schools, of course, they're moving up from an F to a C in 1 year because they have resource after resource after resource thrown at them, and I can't even get an assistant principal. You know, those are the kinds of things I hear. So I fear that taking away this kind of support, is it going to be best for students, and what kind of savings are we talking about? So I guess I need more overall information before I can, you know, speak on behalf of the decision made at the central office. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I don't expect you to you know, give support until you have that type of information. Okay. That's the type of work that we're doing right now. I will say that the people working on this are people who have been you know, doing this work for a very long time. You know, it is their area of expertise, and quite honestly, I mean, one of the things, I was having a conversation earlier today with some of our chiefs, and compensation is something that has been an area of interest of mine for many, many, many years. I mean, my dissertation is in it. I do think that our school district, in terms of how we compensate our employees, we can make gains in student achievement based on really, I think, innovative ways of compensating of our employees and while remaining competitive. Mm-hmm. I also can tell you, walking around to different schools and being a part of human resources for a number of years, and then seeing how different schools operate, that there are definitely some inefficiencies that are out there in terms of how we staff that we could certainly improve. We have, you know, paraprofessionals is one that we've already picked on. We've also looked at administrative ratios, you know, in terms of the number of assistant principals we have. We have lost some other support structures, school counselors, social workers, as a result of overstaffing maybe assistant principals, mm-hmm. because they're kind of like a utility infielder. You can utilize them for a wide variety of things, but I think there's more efficient ways to do that. You know, some different uses of instructional staff, you know, we can achieve some of those functions in a way that is just as effective without employing an assistant principal at you know, 216-day contract at a higher rate of pay. You know, many of us coming up through had experience as instructors, not being paid at that level, but still was working at that type of, doing that type of work, you know. Do you need that for somebody, for example, that's just implementing the code of conduct day in and day out? I would argue you would not need that. So I think there's just a better way of doing business. We obviously, the bottom line for us is student achievement, so we don't want to do anything as it relates to student achievement. I can assure you that you know, that's going to be at our forefront when we're making these decisions.
Okay, thank you.
So then this is a really interesting conversation, and I just said to Melissa, can I go over there and kiss him now, because I've been waiting years to hear that. But when I looked at this, I thought this is strictly, and correct me if I'm wrong, an efficiency audit.
Study.
Report.
Study. Report. Okay. So I look at efficiency versus effectiveness. So if we're going to be making changes based on this study, I think we need to look at the other part of it too. And if that's happening, correct me, because...
And when we go through these, each of us in each of these areas, they're not wholesale changes that are happening tomorrow. It is the next phase or the next step, whether we are doing it ourselves internally, of what it would look like. Does it make sense? And doing more of that deeper dive, because yes, the first phase of this was really just that surface scan. It was looking at everything in general and just in general, our practice, our processes, and how we do what we do. And so the next part of this is, okay, in the areas where it is noted that we could be more efficient as it relates to our peers, or just in general, where are those areas that we would like to take a deeper dive? Where have we already? What has been in progress and in process? And what are some areas where maybe we may need some help from the consultant to do that deeper dive as well?
Okay, so then I'm going to hold the rest of my questions until you go through this step by step.
Thank you. And Mr. Blurton, I think you talked about that sort of at length with the Finance Advisory Committee and with specific regard to those small schools.
Right.
So is it inefficient to have those small schools? Yes, but is it a decision that we as a community want to and have to support because of the location and the student body and all of that? So this is not just efficiency from the feedback I've been getting. This is how can we be as efficient as possible while improving outcomes for students. Right.
And some of these where you might look, and in the report itself in detail, it may say, it may seem, and Gibson noted even in person, that some of these although it may look like we're being less efficient than our peers or in general in comparison, some of them are good, sound business decisions. One of the examples is in food service, and you'll hear a few more here as well too, is it's a good business decision because we're doing things a better way, we're serving better food, fresher produce. It takes more time to do that. It's a higher cost. Those are examples of that.
Great, thank you.
All right. Okay. I will turn it over to Dr. Pruitt.
All right, so relative to human resources, there were 10 areas that Gibson looked at, and 8 of those I don't have an issue with, and what they tell and what they were about. As a matter of fact, 4 of them are about turnover, and I mean, I did a presentation to you at the last board briefing. I mean, that's been our focus for the last couple of years, and finally have some data to support that that's going in the right direction. And again, looking at the measures in that, so I completely agree with those areas and that it's something that we need to continue to work on. The other area has to do with the workers' compensation per FTE, and I do think that there are things that we can do as a district that go beyond HR that could help us with that measure. And so from that standpoint, I was totally in agreement with it. It's the overall rating that I have issue with, and I do because they make that assumption based on 3 indicators, and one has to do with the HR staffing ratio, and the other has to do with the cost, the HR cost per FTE. The flaw in the way that they're looking at it is that they're stating that because there has been an increase in staffing and an increase in money and human resources over the last 5 years, that therefore we're inefficient. But what they're not putting into context is that we were so understaffed and there was so little money being spent on human resources that that's why when we finally have a superintendent and a board that supported what needed to happen to make human resources be a division that was actually able to do the work. And so therefore I have issue with what that overall rating is relative to those particular indicators, because when you look at our ratio and compare it to like districts, compare it to nonprofits, we're still below the average. When you compare what we spend per FTE for like districts, like companies, we are less than the average. So, and I even had some follow-up conversations, and their response to me was, but that's how we do it. Like, it wasn't about, and they said, remember, this is a surface look, this is how we look at it. We don't do that at this level, we don't do that detailed of a comparison, and we don't look at context. So that's kind of, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have relative to it.
I guess I'm not clear on that. I thought that, I read your response, and I thought that they were using a ratio for us that they were using for the comparison districts that were part of the study. No? Is there a difference there?
No, there's a difference. They and I even, like I said, had a follow-up email relative to that, and they said that they couldn't give me a benchmark for what they used. What they were looking at is the fact that it steadily increased over the last 5 years at a greater rate than general growth would be.
Okay.
As I understood it, what they were doing is they were looking at the general growth of the district in terms of the number of students that we were, the rate at which we were growing from a student population, and compared that to the rate at which human resources staffing grew. And the expectation would be you would grow at relatively the same rate. Again, is the way I understood it.
Yeah, their ratio didn't compare us to other districts of like size. Their ratio, they were just saying, here's been your ratio, and it went from, and they sent me the chart, it went from this up to this over 5 years, and that was a higher rate than what the growth of the district was.
Okay, and then there was some discussion of the cost per FTE, and that wasn't necessarily, the way they looked at that wasn't necessarily fair because they didn't include part-time employees in there?
No, they don't include part-time employees, and they also don't include any of the work that we have to do for our for like our substitute teachers. It doesn't include the work for any of the work we have to do for charter schools.
So what is the difference, for example, between hiring a teacher in a traditional public school and hiring a teacher in a charter school from your perspective?
From the work that HR has to do? Yes. So we have to do all of the compliance pieces. In other words, we have to monitor that they're certified. We have to maintain all of those records. We have to, so we don't have to do, like if they have a change of address or something, we don't have to do that. But any of the other work relative to the process and making sure that they are able to be a teacher goes through our specialists.
Okay, so then there is no real difference for you, other than...
It is not the same level of workload. I would say probably hiring charter, it's probably about a 50% in the work that has to be done by the specialist.
Okay, and what, and something about part-time employees not being included in here wasn't fair because they can be...
We don't care whether they're part-time or full-time. We still have to do the exact same work.
But training is different, isn't it, for part-time employees opposed to full-time?
In terms of, I mean, they still do the orientation, they still do, I mean, so in terms of optional training, I guess, maybe they don't take as much, but that's not factored into what this was looking at.
All right, and then the only other piece on this, on HR, I mean, this was really the only part of the Gibson report that stuck out to me as a negative. Don't take that the wrong way. Mm-hmm. But from the outside looking in, you look at this report and HR is like, screaming at you, needing some attention. And my only concern here is that there's no objectivity in any of our approaches to looking at HR. And whether we would benefit from that. This is a big part of our budget. You can look at the budget book and you can see, what is it, 66 million? Somewhere, no, not 66 million, 7.8 million. It's big, and so the lack of objectivity in your response and in our approach to it bothers me. And if you can help me feel more comfortable with that, then...
Well, I would say, I guess a couple things to that. First, I believe in other things that Dr. Pruitt has brought to the board, and we could obviously provide this later, but some of it, when you're comparing staffing ratios to peer districts, to comparable organizations, even if you say something like, Lee Health, and you compare it to the private sector, we can do that and give you you know, the data is what it is, and then you can bring to it whatever conclusion you make from that data. But the data that we've provided in the past certainly demonstrates that it has not been staffed at what would be a typical level for a human resources organization of this size. And then if you look at the staffing level, even for our peer districts, it would be less than that. So I would, I would say, if just in general, if you went down to Collier County and looked at how many FTE do you have per employee for HR versus what we do, I would be very confident in saying we're less than that. The other thing that I would argue is that I think we have to do what we need to do to get the mission done that in a unique set of circumstances here in Lee County, and that is that we're a growing district, as you know. Now we do have teacher shortages across the state, but when you hire at the level that we're hiring, historically it's been 600 to 700 to 800 every single year. That's not, my uncle used to tell my dad, if he had 15 openings in Boone County, he was sweating the vacancies, at 15 openings, and we're sitting here with 700 openings, and so that makes it very different. I think Lee County is maybe not entirely unique to Florida, but I think with our growth makes it different than most in that, the student mobility numbers I gave you last board meeting, I think staffing numbers, staffing mobility is also very similar. So we have to just hire more. And then what makes that even more complicated is that we have to provide more staff development, I believe, than most states to get our teachers over the general knowledge exam, the subject area exam, and stuff like that other places don't have to do. So I just think all of that makes us a little bit unique, which means we have to staff a little bit differently.
I also think, if you want to review the Sterling Challenge that we went through, because that's that's nobody here, and they did a much more in-depth look at human resources than Gibson did relative to the processes and procedures and how the work is done, and they have the ability to compare that because they have done that, among other school districts, not only in Florida, but across the nation.
But last thing, I would say this. At the end of this, I'll give my recommendation, but I don't think it's going to bother any of us if the board would rather go in a different direction and wanted to do a deep dive here. Part of the reason I'll make the recommendation I make is some of the sizes of some of the budgets that we want to potentially impact, and so where do we want to spend our dollars?
Mm-hmm. I guess those two things would make me feel more comfortable if I could see a comparison of ratios for other districts of like size. Mm-hmm. Also, just for fun, I'd like to read that report you just referenced. And, what was the last thing?
Especially growing districts.
Yeah, especially growing districts. I'll remember the last thing and I'll ask him. If I forget, I'll send you an email.
Okay.
So what's next there in this presentation?
Well, they're going to continue to go through the rest of the
We've got
divisions.
We've got a few more to go. Business services are the next few slides, and we also still have transportation, food service, facilities, and technology. The 3 areas within, the 4 areas actually within business services that were reviewed, they took food service as its own standalone. That's a little bit later in the presentation. But under business services, the 3 areas that were reviewed, really more of process, was procurement, accounts payable, and payroll. And the efficiency was overall mixed, but as they looked through procurement as above average, and then really looking into accounts payable and payroll and just some of the manual processes that we have, there was room for improvement in our efficiency and a below average efficiency ranking in those areas. But some of the best practices that were noted is we are trending to being more of an automated processes in the way that we take our POs and process our POs, our invoicing, our payroll in general. And as everybody speaks, let's remember that Gibson came in and started this audit towards the end of last year in November and really finished the bulk of their review in April, and then some back and forth and just some confirmation and clarifications, and we had the presentation at the end of the school year. And one of the things to note, especially as we start stepping through the business services and in procurement, payroll, and accounts payable, is a lot of the projects that have been underway, because we know a lot of what came out in this efficiency study in these three areas, and what are we doing to improve those. And it's also the same for each of the other areas that have been discussed and will be discussed. Procurement has been, as far as the use of P cards and really getting how can we get out there and really look at our P card usage and where can we be more efficient in that, and updating raising the limit amount to $4,999 as we kept it low. That was just it was more of an inefficient process. One of the other areas that procurement has done is the use of a marketplace in our district warehouse. They actually just concluded a Greenbelt project and working with Mr. Cody on our warehouse. We have a lot of inventory in our warehouse, and doing the study of what sits and isn't, is potentially inefficient use of our resource, especially if stuff just sits and becomes useless. Where can we really go to more of a marketplace and get supplies and goods directly to our schools? That was one of the things that was underway after this study had gone. But in general, and Frederick is here and can answer any of the questions that you might have after this, a lot of the work that's been done to make procurement more efficient in Gibson did see that. The two areas where we absolutely know where it has been historically a very manual process, and that's kind of the theme, especially with these next two looks at accounts payable and payroll. How we have utilized PeopleSoft when we implemented it 10 years ago till today. You typically do have software to help automate a lot of process, but over the years we still do a lot of manual paper intensive work that we have since this audit. Even before when this audit began, it was in process utilizing Laserfish, which automates and digitizes documentation and process that we have. And it's not just accounts payable that uses this, but each of our different departments and divisions use it, and really increasing how we invoice and route POs electronically. Also in electronic data interchange. So this is all about the invoices that we process. We process thousands and thousands of invoices, and when I say invoices, it's not just invoices to our vendors. It's also all of the expense checks that we cut and invoices for that, all of the P-card vouchers that we have to go through, well over 30,000 plus, and we've already incorporated 25% of those to become more of an electronic digitized process, and that's improving every day, and that's one of our main goals, and Mark is here and also can speak to that as well. The more that we automate it, the less manual that we have, the less requirement for actual human interaction and error, and so it's just more of an efficient process. But this is the areas that we continually want to look at, and if there is the opportunity to look at best practices and what other districts are doing. I know Mark and his team and working with Susan Millay and myself and what we already have been doing and what we will continue to do going forward. And payroll, one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, is you never miss a paycheck. You never mess up payroll. And despite the sheer amount of payroll that we process, and a lot of it has been manual, there's been a lot of work that the payroll team, that the HR team, that we have been going through and working with with Brian Ebers and his team, and just how we can really improve how we process payroll. Even with PeopleSoft, it has been a manual process, way too much manual process and too much paper. We have realized this over the number of years, and it is a big ship to turn, but that ship has begun to turn with a number of different projects, as well as Greenbelt projects that has been a cross-division department collaboration on how we improve payroll, just making it more efficient and less manual. Direct deposit, it used to be not too long ago that we still did not, that a lot of our employees did not do direct deposit. We now mandate all employees have direct deposit. Also manual processes that we have, and it's all listed here, from manual paychecks. We do a lot of out of cycle paychecks, and that's a lot of time and work, and it's inefficient. So if we can make it more of where we have the 2 pay periods, and the only time that we pay in between is if we made an error, that makes it a lot more efficient. And it's under payroll, but digitizing the PAF, the personal action file and overtime process, it's what year would you say that's from? 80s and 90s, and working with Trey, HR, our team, and digitizing and automating that process where it's electronic, that just helps tremendously as well too. But again, with the Greenbelt project that Kim and Susan were a part of, with Dr. Pruitt's team, that whole project was on really what is the root causes and problems and challenges that we have, and our process with PeopleSoft and getting it more efficient. So what's important to note is a lot of improvements have been underway and are in progress and close to being finalized. And then as we get through that and looking at what are additional areas that we can is always welcome as well.
Just as we transition, I know that we're getting short on time, so I'll ask, if you have questions, we'll do a little bit briefer summary on the rest of these. And if you have deeper questions, please just jump in.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Blurton. Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Atkins, it's with much pleasure that I deliver the response to both building maintenance or facilities maintenance and facilities utilization. The first thing that the Gibson report looked at was building utilizations, which I'm very happy to say is above average, 90% utilization. It is tied for the highest utilization rate in the state. Only, I believe, 2 districts are ahead of us, St. John's and another really small district, Okaloosa. Now, while that is a good indicator, it also needs to be an indicator that we continually watch, because when you're utilizing your buildings over 100%, that could actually be a indicator that your schools are crowded. So what we're going to try to do there, or continue to do there, is to continually develop a more accurate forecasting model, which we are very pleased with what we have now, but there's always room for improvement. We also need to start looking at the way that we distribute our students through the student enrollment program. So that's something that we're working on as well. The next thing that we looked at was maintenance, and obviously maintenance is an area that we know that we can continuously improve. The cost per square foot for maintenance has obviously increased. We do like to note that we were actually compared with schools in the Council of Great City Schools program. Although some of the comparisons to like districts or peer districts here in the state of Florida, we do compare favorably. So if we're going to take a deeper dive, I do recommend that we look at normalizing some of this data and really doing a good compare to pinpoint the areas that we can improve in. With that said, we do understand that the facilities that we own are aging and the cost for maintenance will increase over a period of time. We also acknowledge the fact that preventative maintenance has been a challenge for us with reduced budgets. And with that said, what we need to do moving forward is build a better model for facilities management and monitoring the conditions of our buildings, so we're heading off problems before they're happening. We've already jumped in and improved our processes for looking at work orders and prioritizing them and reducing the time it takes for our maintenance department to address repairs. One other thing I'd like to recommend, and hopefully this is something we can look at a little deeper, is what we do with new construction and looking at life cycle costs, because there are implications when you choose to build with certain materials for maintenance of the building over the life of that particular facility. So I think that's something that we have to work closer with maintenance when we're designing and building new schools, is what materials are we investing in, what systems are we investing in to maximize maintenance over a longer period of time. The last one was custodial efficiency, which they rated above average. Like Greg had mentioned earlier on, we need to review and modify the custodian and building supervisor allocation formula so that's more equitable, particularly for those smaller schools. And we also probably need to do a better job of analyzing what variables are affecting our productivity at the schools as far as cleaning them and providing janitorial services. We have varying amounts of systems in our schools, materials, finishes, floors are a good example of that. What are ways we can maximize productivity in cleaning and maintaining those building pieces? So altogether, we believe as a continuous improvement organization, there are a lot of things that we need to look at moving forward.
Davis. Good afternoon. So I'm pleased with the efficiency is above average, but let me say that has come with a lot of hard work. Over the last couple of years, we've really transitioned from multiple departments, that had different, work styles, processes, culture, and over the last couple of years, we've matured into, one with a culture of inclusion and innovation, and that, in fact, drives performance. So we are happy to see the efficiency gains as above average. So some of the changes that you see in process, tools used, methodologies, interactions with, our key partners and other divisions are a result of that. So we're proud of some of the best practices that were noted. At present, cost optimization is a huge focus. Quite frankly, with or without a budget crisis, it's crucial, especially crucial when you have such budget constraints as we do. It's super critical when it comes to advancing your sustainability strategy, your digital business model, and of course, Envision 2030 or any district strategy that we do have. So let me give you a great example, printer consolidation. So we are doing that in tandem with a lot of digitizing of business processes at the moment. It's working in tandem, not sequentially. And what we've noticed is that, we are reducing about, so far, we're on a run rate of 70% reduction of printers in and around the district so far. So if you think about the fact that that is over a third of our support cost internally, that represents an incredible savings that allows us to elevate our service levels to where it needs to be, and often you will hear me say more juice out of the orange that you have. So I think it's super important that we also reduce the consumables, whether it be the toner, paper, just from an environmental standpoint, but also business sustainability. So as we work across each of the divisions, this reduction in printers is also exposing where we need to improve or digitize business processes, ones that are paper intensive. Let me also say that pleased with the device and staff efficiencies as above average. I think that's really important. There's one particular, on page 54, you'll notice ratio of total employees to technical support staff. That was in a downward trend, yet we're optimal relative to, our device and staff utilization or efficiencies. So I think it's important not only to look at the total number of staff. That sometimes works when you're in a single building. Maybe you have a corporate has one large building, but when you have a county the size of ours with the number of buildings that we have, you have to factor in the geography, you have to factor in the staff, you have to factor in the number of devices. And as you know, we're actually over a a 1-to-1 ratio in certain cases. So I would say relative to the last point, as far as sourcing versus not, we have a very healthy mix or balance of sourced versus not applications. And you might have heard me say during the workshop that if we want to be world-class, we can't use commercial off-the-shelf software like everyone else. So now what we are finding is that areas of our core SIS, we will migrate into a sourced model. But our Castle product, as an example, will continue to allow us to thrive in areas such as, advanced analytics and a couple of other areas that will help us achieve the student levels of learning we want. So with that, any questions?
Looks like you're on the right track.
Thank you.
Next up is food services, which Gibson looked at staff productivity and cost efficiency as overall above average. As I mentioned earlier when we first started, was just as far as the increase in overall meal costs. We are utilizing higher quality product from food as well as what we serve our lunches and breakfasts in. And it's a sound business decision. It may cost more per meal for our students, but we're feeding them better food in those areas. One of the things that we are doing currently right now, and what food service does do every year, is looking at, where are we? One of the things that we hear from parents, or just some of the frustration, is there seems to be a lot of food that's wasted or just thrown out. And our food services department does do what we call plate waste studies. So they actually go out to schools and sit there and observe of how much food is just being thrown out, and really then assessing what that is, and then going back out to address those situations. So those are things that not everybody knows that we do, and that we do every year. I know I've talked to a few of you about that, and what we are doing in those areas. And then also just, we also get, why don't we just use, there's a whole bunch of utensils that we just waste, and why don't we just use, regular cutlery and use dishwashers, and that is a situation where the amount of energy that's used in washing dishes over and over again, if we can, it's continual things that we look at, and does it make more sense to use utensils that we can throw away that are biodegradable versus washing dishes every single day, multiple times a day, and the energy that's absorbed. So overall, food service is working very well. An area that we do, as everything that you've heard today, that we continue to always look for areas to be more efficient and improve. This is one of the only departments that does produce revenue, and some of that revenue we've actually been able to realize as part of this study, and some are redistributing some of our indirect costs also. So that was food services. Mr. Cody.
Transportation last, and with time constraints, so I'll be very quick. We're above average efficiency, and that's a tribute to our staff, the board, and everyone within the school district of Lee County, because we were challenged at reducing our operational efficiency while maintaining a high level of customer service. When you look at our challenges in transportation, you have to look at our geographical location with the barrier islands and with the river that splits our county in half. And when they compare us to counties within the state of Florida, as well as through the Council of Great City Schools, we did pretty well. And if you compare us, and using previous data, last year we started the school year off with 766 regular bus routes. This year we reduced that to 718, and we are still holding steady while increasing our student population last year, well, student riders, to 976. So the challenge was accepted, and it was issued down by Dr. Atkins and our team in order to improve our efficiency. If you look at our controlled savings last year, we're at about $2.9 million in controlled savings, and that's not reducing the cost of fuel, because that's an uncontrollable component that we unfortunately have to deal with. But I would say that if I look at what we need to do, and I love the report. It was very eye-opening, and then we'll use it as a foundational springboard. However, we can continuously improve in our department through training, recruiting, and retaining bus operators, continuous automation of transportation, continuous improvement of customer service, because our customers are our primary focus, because they're the students. The first person they see, our bus operators, the last person they see. And our operational efficiency, to continue to reduce costs while maintaining and improving our quality of service. And that'll be all. Any questions?
Questions, anybody?
I just want to say great job. Thank you.
So Dr. Atkins, where will we go with this? It looks like there are a lot of things in process. Will those be brought to us individually as we begin to make changes, or recommendations for changes that the board will need to be a part of?
So my recommendation would be, you're looking at the Gibson report and making a determination, are there areas within this report that the board would like to do a phase 2 detailed analysis? And so my recommendation, talking to staff and then talking with many of the board members is that in the areas that I would be recommending that, if that was the board's pleasure, would be in the area of maintenance. The reason for that has to do with that particular department has the largest, in terms of amount of dollars associated with it, except for transportation. I think transportation is the only other budget other than the maintenance department that has a larger budget than the maintenance department. So this would be one in the central office would be our largest budget areas. And of course, when you look at Council of Great City Schools, it did point out the cost per square foot and the cost per employee was in the lower quartile, if memory serves. So this is an area that I think we could certainly, it may benefit us to take a deeper dive. I think in a couple areas in business services, financial accounting being one, payroll being another. Again, these are large areas in terms of the amount of the impact that they have across the district. Everybody, all employees receive a paycheck, and if you look at things like cost per paycheck and then in financial accounting, the number of transactions that are done per FTE, those type of things. Why do you do this? You're looking to hopefully bring in external expertise that may not be within this district to help. That the purpose of this deeper dive is not to create another audit or anything like that, is to help us improve as an organization. Those would be the areas that I would look at least starting out, if this is something we would want to do. I think that before we say, with all finality, this is what we want to do, I would like for us to be able to reach out to Gibson Consulting as an organization and talk to them about what that process would look like, because we do have a staff here that has undergone 4 audits in a very short period of time, plus dealt with a hurricane, and so there's a lot of audit overload. And so we want to make sure that this is something that would be of benefit to the school district. Do not need to do like I've seen. We had a transportation audit about, what was that, Robert? That was like 4 or 5 years ago. That we paid them $20,000. They gave us a good audit. They spent a lot of time, but they really didn't give us anything that I felt was of value. In fact, it really was probably more of a hindrance. We don't want that. We want to improve as an organization. So that would be my recommendation. Again, would be, I would say those areas. I would say before we do that, let's find out the cost. So I can bring you that, compare that to the benefit of paying those amount of dollars, and then also give us an idea in terms of what would the staff workload be, and consider the timing of when that might fit best.
So do we have a process then for tracking when we look at the areas where we're intending to make some improvement, like we do on our strategic plan? What's the data now? And then mid-year and end of year, like we do on our strategic plan?
Yeah, for example, the key performance indicators that you see on the Council for Great City Schools, the areas that I mentioned there, all 3 of those areas, you have comparison data with Council for Great City Schools, and certainly Department Improvement Plan goals and objectives can be aligned to improving in those key performance indicators. So that's what we would be benchmarking against, in any effort that we do.
Okay, so that will all be compiled then at some point in time, where we're setting goals, and then we can start to track them.
Right.
Okay.
Right. They've established
and the cost with it.
Yes. Yes.
So we know what our ROI is.
And then just, there are other areas that we could certainly look at, and, I think we should at least, if we try a portion of it, see how that goes before we go looking further into, doing a phase 2 in this area or that area. See if it's something that we that we feel is beneficial. The other thing is that there are a lot of things that are going on right now as a result of this audit that I think we're going to start reaping the benefits of in the very near future. Trey Davis told me today, and correct me, you have a microphone in front of me, but like the PAF and the overtime process are two things that we really want to bring to a closure hopefully by the end of this particular year. I've always kind of jokingly said, if you look at my PAF from 30 plus years ago, it's probably the same daggone form as it is right now.
Exactly.
That has got to go. It has got to go.
Yeah.
So, I think this is, there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes right now that I think this this efficiency report has started.
Yeah,
so. Good.
I just think it's very important that we track it.
Yes.
From here on in. Okay. Anything else, board members?
So I thought that they said the reason why maintenance was inefficient was because we had lost funding for preventative maintenance. And so now we're responding to things as they break instead of being able to prevent things from breaking, which is, of course, much cheaper. Am I not remembering that conversation correctly from the workshop?
Well, I would certainly say that's a part of it. But I think there's other pieces. Greg and I have also looked at things like, he's looked at fund balances and he allocates a budget every year and how much do you carry over. We also think that if you're looking, I've had some discussions with Jerry Deming about how work orders are processed and so forth, and maybe a better way to do that. I just think it's an area, they do a great job, don't get me wrong. That's one thing I think we all can agree that maintenance department is one of the hardest working departments in the, in the district, but we can always improve in terms of our efficiency, and I'm hoping that some outside expertise could help in that area.
So, that makes sense to me. It is a huge part of the budget, but if you look at payroll, for example, I think that's one of your areas of recommendation. That's only 1.57 million. So what are we actually going to find in there in terms of savings versus what it's going to cost? And then I would like to take this to Finance Advisory Committee before we make any decisions at all, because they are the ones that recommended that we do this. So right. I'll ask Greg if you wouldn't mind, and maybe have other staff there. Dr. Pruitt, if you could explain what you explained to me today, I think that will help them, and whatever other staff you think needs to be there. I know we've already gone through it, but they need to make those recommendations as well. I think we need to consider those before we make it.
I can get additional, while we were sitting here, sent an email to Gibson to ask, can you at least provide comparable data from other districts you've worked with, rather than looking at the increase, rather the number against a number. So.
And I sent you the email because I remembered the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Board members, anything else? Good work. You have convinced me that we truly are a continuous improvement organization, and thank you for always being on top of that and ready to go to the next level. You've done a lot of work on this, and much appreciated.
And thank your staff as well.
Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, and along those lines, I was just going to say that I think we should also take it to the CSI committee.
Oh, yes.
Because they would probably have some input.
They would, you know what, they were actually, the committee was actually asking if there was anything that we wanted them to look at. And so I really believe this is an area that we should consider as well.
Good. I have a question. What's the pilot project utensil dispenser? I'm curious what that is. Savings.
At the schools, it was what I was mentioning as far as actual utensils versus using disposable utensils, and what utensils, believe it or not, are used more than others, and it's the continued analysis of, is it more cost effective to have real utensils and wash them versus disposable utensils?
I'll be curious on that outcome of that pilot.
So. Yeah, and so what about like what they do at McDonald's and those places? They have disposable utensils, but you only take what you want.
That's part of it, exactly.
Yes. You don't need them.
Right, they're not taking every utensil out.
Right. not having a whole package of them.
Exactly.
Exactly, I agree.
And those are very efficient too, where you just press the button, one comes out. Good.
Coming
Anything
to a
else?
school near you.
All righty, thank you very much. Thanks for all your work. And the next item on our agenda, Dr. Atkins, is our annual investment summary.
I was just barely being kind of funny.
Mr. Blurton, I'm sure, is on target for that as well.
Yeah.
I think kids will take 20. You know, you don't think, really?
They don't, when they go to McDonald's over. My gosh, so small. So old.
Disney does actually, they have like a machine, like a little, you know, but I always see like 5 forks in there, you know, 'cause they don't, you know.
A little bit less. But now.
Welcome.
Hello again. So the next part of the briefing is our annual investment report, and I have our advisors first to my left from Water Walker, and not JC. Okay, I'll just leave that there. David Jang, and then to David's left is Matt Tite from Public Trust Advisors, and so they are advisors in helping manage our primarily our cash investment portfolio. Water Walker manages our more longer-term investment portfolio, 1 to 5 years, and Public Trust Advisors with Matt manages our shorter-term, 1 to 3 years. So this is something that we brief you every year at this time, is how did our portfolio perform over the last fiscal year. I will turn this over, beginning with David.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Atkins, and Mr. Williams. Thank you very much for having me here today. I have some very great news. Kudos to the finance team for executing a great strategy that our 2 firms had recommended to the district back in January 2017. I'm going to bring you to this first slide right here. This is just your cash that you spend down within your fiscal year. So as of June 30th, if you look on the bottom right-hand side, you have your total cash portfolio of roughly $316 million. On the left-hand side, that beautiful, colorful pie chart, you're very well diversified in 4 different local government investment pools. You have your money at your operating bank, which is SunTrust, and on top of that, you have money at a local bank, Florida Community Bank. Very nice, well diversified. Your cash is no risk to principal. And I want to bring you to the attention of the middle of the right-hand side, and you have your interest earnings from July 1 of 2017 to June 30th of 2018. Almost $5 million that you've earned to district. Wow. So congratulations. The current interest rate environment, we think the Federal Reserve is going to continue to raise interest rates for the next year. So this number should continue to rise, and you could count that on in your budget. With that, any questions?
Board members?
I don't think I've ever heard anyone present about a cash portfolio in such an excited manner.
It's wonderful.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Just over to Matt now.
Thank you, board members. Dr. Atkins, Mr. Williams, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present today. My name is Matt Tite. I'm with Public Trust Advisors, and we're responsible for the 1 to 3 year duration strategy. And really this strategy is to have a maturity structure slightly short of the benchmark, just due to a rising interest rate environment that we find ourselves in. The portfolio is compliant with the district's policy and with Florida state statutes, and it's really just a part of the overall diversified investment program that uses daily liquidity, this 1 to 3 year strategy, along with a 1 to 5 year strategy that provides investment opportunity in both a rising and declining interest rate environment. So as you can see, the annual earnings year over year was just shy of $790,000. The return on the portfolio for the last quarter is 1.36%, and the benchmark is 90 basis points, excuse me, so definitely an increase against the benchmark. Overall portfolio is $51 million, and the duration as of 6/30 is 1.63 years versus the benchmark or index, I should say, of 1.85 years.
Board members?
Great.
Yeah. Questions?
Okay, and then last one here, we manage the 1 to 5 year portion here. If you look at your current earnings for the year in this portfolio, from July 1 of 2017 to June 30th, you have almost you have a little over $842,000 in interest income for the full year. Very nice. The portfolio's total return for the period, 1.25% versus a benchmark of 0.51%. So once again, we've justified our fee. Okay, so very nice. On the left-hand side, that pie chart, very well diversified amongst all the securities that's under your investment policy and Florida State investment statutes. Very happy to see that your overall portfolio between your cash, your 1 to 3 and 1 to 5 longer-term portfolios, almost $6.5 million in interest earned. So congrats to the board. And that concludes our report.
And thank you to you. Board members, anything else?
Thank you very much.
This
Right,
is wonderful.
we have exceeded our expectations, and that's due to your advisement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we shall now move to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak under public comment? If not, we'll move on to board member comments, starting with Ms. Fisher.
Okay, very briefly, I'm happy to report that Lee County School District has the largest team signed up for the drug-free prevention run on October 6th. So I want to congratulate everybody and look forward to seeing you there. As I had said before, I attended Cape Coral High School International Baccalaureate Breakfast and had an opportunity to review with the students their extended essays, and was so highly impressed by the amount of work that they put into it, and it lasts from junior year through senior year, and they'll be submitted to the IB organization in May. But it was just phenomenal, and the information was way beyond outstanding. Earlier this morning, I had an opportunity to volunteer at Pace Center, where they had a health fair, where the kids had vision, auditory screening, breast examinations, and lots of information, and that was sponsored by Lee Health as a community partner, and it was very, very informative. So at the District Advisory Council meeting this month, we had reports on volunteerism. Beginning the meeting, Mr. Dodig discussed Sunshine Law and apprised everybody of their responsibilities as far as that went. And then we had Carol Wilkie, who's now the Administrator for Parent Communications, presented information on becoming a volunteer, and Dr. Carlin also talked about volunteer opportunities currently available in the district. Then we had presentations from Dr. Millens from the North Fort Myers Academy for the Arts, along with some of his staff, who shared the importance of volunteers and how they monitor, how they recruit, train, and monitor their volunteers, and the return on the investment that they get from that is very good. Also, Ed Matthews from South Fort Myers High presented parent involvement opportunities at his school, such as open houses, senior parent night, and he also shared how the students are part of that volunteerism. And so that was a very good meeting. Then I attended the School Health Advisory Committee meeting, where there's a lot of information shared. And one of the things, and I think I might have announced this at one time before, but all of our schools now have AEDs, thanks to our partnership with the Golisano Children's Hospital and the work of Sue Groves, our Assistant Director for Health Services. And I would like to recommend that the school board send a letter to Golisano thanking them for that donation so that each one of our schools is prepared in case of a life-threatening event. We had a couple of other presentations, but definitely the most outstanding one was a presentation on human trafficking by Ruth Tanghai, who is a senior at Fort Myers High School. The committee would like to recommend that she present to the board at a briefing, and that she also present to the Student Advisory Committee. She has done almost a year's worth of research, and everybody was blown away by her information and her commitment to working on this problem, which is very prevalent, as Mrs. LaRiviere can attest, in this community. And she talked about the kids that are sitting in our schools every day who are victims of human and sexual trafficking. So that was another thing. I also wanted to correct myself. I think at a previous meeting I talked about deaths from opioid overdoses being 3,000 a day, and I misspoke. It's over 3,000 a month. In 2016, opioid overdose deaths was 42,000, so that was over 3,000 a month. And there was also discussion regarding the issue of the Juul, J-U-U-L, which is looks like a little flash drive, and that's where the kids are smoking whatever they put into it in school. Right. So there was discussion about that and how we need to really work together to try to limit that. And the other thing was that I did see a news report saying that the State Department of Health has given stores and vendors 2 weeks to stop marketing that to kids because they are very highly susceptible to the marketing that is kind of subliminal online and on TV. And of course, they're not really too willing to do that because it's a huge moneymaker. I want to give a shout out to Robert Snyder, who is a special education teacher, and he's now at Island Coast High School. And he was featured with his students in the Living Well section of the News Press today. He poses with his kids as they have partnered with community members in growing food. And so now Island Coast High School is in competition with Trafalgar Middle to try to produce enough food to feed the community. And so I wanted to give a shout out to Robert because he's been doing this for many years, and he really gets those kids involved in life skills, and their confidence increases, and he actually is preparing them for careers in the future. So I want to thank our teachers who do what they do every day to help our students become successful and to benefit our community. And that's all I have.
Ms. Fisher, did you mention having that program, excuse me, on human trafficking for our District Advisory Council?
I did not, but that's a very good idea.
I think that would be a great program for them. They'd really appreciate that. And maybe even the opioid information as well. I think that would go over very well. Okay, Ms. LaRiviere.
Oh, and along with that, we need to include the plan where we are with developing, creating training, and what our plan is for our staff. So there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes that we're trying to do to get everything pulled together.
Yes, and I think Ruth Ann's presentation can really be a conduit to emphasizing the importance of our staff being able to recognize those who are victimized and to be able to have a forum to know what to do about it and who to report it to.
Exactly. So having those protocols, having, knowing what to do.
Shiva, Nellie?
Pam and I attended the SIDS training yesterday at LAMP, and that was really great. This is my second time, and that was really nice. And the training is so good because these girls have a lot of questions, and I think they get a lot of answers. The other thing is I attended the FSBA meeting when Chris left. So they took 3 votes that I wasn't anticipating that day, and one was to join the League of Women Voters on Amendments 1 through 5 in support. That failed, and they decided not to do that. The second one was the Guardian monies. They were talking about asking for the Guardian monies, and that failed, and that was both of those were very long, heated conversations that went on for a while. And then the third was they did a resolution amendment, a resolution for Amendment 8, because they feel like that's going to come back around, so they changed some verbiage, and maybe you can find out that, because they didn't go over that, but that passed because they feel like that a portion of that's going to come back with the term limits part of it. So they were rewriting a resolution, but they didn't disclose that exactly, but they agreed with that. So I thought that was interesting. It was a long ways to Live Oak, out in the middle of nowheres.
And so, if they're revising anything, the mail-in ballots go out next week.
Well, no, amendment's off the table.
No.
But they anticipated to come back at some point in time, so they're getting prepared for that.
Yeah, I didn't think there was time for it.
We all thought that was good, so.
Okay, thank you.
So I had FHSAA meetings over the past 2 days, and I just want to mention that it was fabulous to have Lee County represented up there. They are talking about making a change to the classification system for state championships, and it is the first such change in 100 years. So it's really, I think, super essential that Lee County has representation in that process, and I can't just be Lee, I have to be all of the south part of the state.
Right.
Dave can just represent Lee, and Mr. LaRosa can just represent Lee. And he also brought me in on a athletic directors meeting so that I could get feedback from them. And Coach Harris from South Fort Myers High School gave me a sort of a crash course in max preps, like max preps for dummies, so that I knew what I was talking about when I went up to Gainesville. So that was fantastic. One of the things that I've learned in my travels throughout the state and with my involvement with the FHSAA is that the Board of County Commissioners through their Parks and Recreation Department really does a fantastic job with hosting and coordinating athletic tournaments of all sorts across the county. It first came to my attention when I went to baseball this past year, and everybody was praising Parks and Recreation for their hard work. They make the visitors feel welcome. They make people feel special. They just really have it down. And I think you all know that Lee County was just awarded girls volleyball state championships, and I'm not aware of another county across the state that has 2 state championship series in the same county. So that's really a feather in the cap of the Board of County Commissioners. I did send them an email telling them of the praise that I've received across the state, and I intend to go to one of their meetings during public comment so that the public can know. You know, an email is kind of hidden, but the public needs to hear what they're doing. I will give you all a written report of Finance Advisory Committee, but I will say that almost without exception, we as a group took the charge very, very seriously to make sure that people with a high degree of financial acumen were appointed to the board. I'm super impressed. I think this is going to be a great year for finance advisory. And I don't know whether I talked to Greg or Mr. Williams about this, but I feel a little bit bullied here today. Did anybody see what's written on the board in the back there?
The truth. The truth. Go Lions. The truth.
Go Lions.
I had to publicly throw out the bullying thing there.
And thank you for your representing.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you. And for me, I just want to just add to Ms. Patrica. She puts a quote on the board every day, and last week she quoted Bill Belichick. So this week, I quoted Bill Belichick and said, you either get the job done or you don't. And if you watch Sunday night, they didn't against my Detroit Lions because we got her done and we beat the Patriots. So I just...
Remedy. Mr. Williams, what is my remedy?
There is no remedy. Defend the den.
Thank you, sir. I have no more comments.
Oh, such lively conversations. It's wonderful. spent a lot of time out visiting our schools. I'm really excited about the energy that I'm seeing at the schools and hearing principals, the whole administration team talking about how they are really wanting to build that relationship part within their schools, which really, I'm thrilled and excited to hear that. They just were really emphasizing that. The other aspect that we did, I loved going to the SIDS training and being with the girls and making connections with one of the girls that was there. We had known each other through Policy Council. And we had gotten to know her through Support Our Students. She was one of the students there. But the only bad thing for that was it really made me realize I really want to be a grandmother desperately. That was the only negative to it. We have a lot of exciting things that are taking place, and I'm very proud of our district and our teachers and our staff at all levels. Everyone is working hard, and so appreciative of all of you. And we were talking today, the driver's education program came up, and not everyone is familiar with what the Doris Schlossberg Fund is. And that was first developed because of Doris Schlossberg was killed along with 4 other people in a car accident by a teenage driver, and her twin sister was the only one who survived. And what that fund does is this: each county commission can select to add up to $5 for every traffic violation that goes into driver's education programs for our students. And I'm glad that statute is in place. I hope it stays in place because it's a great way to fund it, and I believe that's one way we can get the funding for some of our things that we need. And I have to say, last Thursday at BUPAC was quite interesting. A few of us were there, but I am what a thrill it was to hear Joe Mazurkiewicz say that at first he wasn't so sure about this half-cent sales tax. And he said, but after I've done all of my research, I've looked at everything, he said, I'm for it. It's desperately needed and it's warranted. And the round of applause. That was the best thing, was hearing a round of applause from all of the BUPAC members. And I wanted to bring this forward here because I thought it would be appropriate to write a letter of congratulations on your retirement to former Sheriff Mike Scott from us as a board to him, and then along with that would be a congratulations to Carmine Marcino for his appointment. And if there's a general consensus approving that, then we will get that letter out with all of our signatures.
Yeah.
Everyone capture? Okay.
It's a rough day in the office for me. My daughter turns 15 tomorrow, so she gets her driver's permit tomorrow.
It is exciting.
And you're talking about the reason for the program. I'm sorry, terror is what I felt before.
I saw your face twitch.
Oh, I don't want her to drive.
But she will be a very responsible driver.
She's still a child.
I know she is.
And a car is big.
And a car is big.
And that's how your parents thought of you. Anything else?
No, that is all.
Thank you. I don't have anything. And Mr. Williams, I'm so sorry. You're one spot in the limelight I took away from you, and that's introduction of public comment. But we welcome you. Thank you for being here. We hope you enjoyed
It's good to be here.
at the table and not watching us from another angle.
And we look forward to you joining us again tonight.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Dr. Atkins.
No comments.
Then with that, this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you all back at 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.